Welcome to App Design Tips. Today I'm going to show you how to create a really compelling composition in Photoshop for the iPad. In this video we have 8 different layers and we're going to composite all these different images into one believable image. So I'm going to turn all of them off again except for the base layer and this planet layer, and let's start with these 2 layers here. So first I'm going to bring this bridge layer above the planet layer. I want it to sit about right here. And I want to mask this bridge layer because I don't want the sky here. So I can go to my marquee tool here. I'm going to select my rectangular marquee tool. And I'm going to select everything up until just barely below this horizon here. And then I can just tap on this mask and everything's masked. So now let's move this layer down. And if I want to constrain my move, I can hold down on my touch shortcut. Let's move this down here. Something right here I think will be good. And I want to move this over this way too. And I might have to expand this just a tiny bit so we have both edges cropped off. And now I'm going to select this planet layer and I can constrain my move. I'm just going to move this up a little bit just until we get these mountains. And then I'm going to go into my transform control. I'm going to constrain this to the center. So I'm going to scale this from the center and just move this up a little bit. So now we have those 2 images about in the place that we want them. And now just working with these 2 images, we need to set the contrast and the hue so they match each other. So I'm going to come back over here into the bridge and I can tap on my layers properties here and I'm going to just add a clipped adjustment. And here let's first start off with the exposure. So let's play with the exposure and see if we can get this something like that. Might look better. And we can just play around with the offset, just give it a little bit more contrast in here. Now, if you're enjoying this tutorial so far and you want to learn more about Photoshop for the iPad, I have a complete essentials training course for Photoshop for the iPad. And there's a steep discount that I'm going to give to you guys, so you can find a link in the description below. And now we're going to try to match the color balance of these 2 images. So here on this bridge, I can tap on Add Clipped Adjustment, and we're going to try color balance first, and just move these around to get a feel for where they are and what they do. So I think I like a little bit of this purple in here, a little bit of the blue. Something more like this helps it to be more believable, but I also want more of a purple cast here in this lake. So I'm going to tap back on bridge, add another clipped adjustment, and add another color balance. And here I'm only looking at the water. I don't care about the look of the bridge and the grass, and I want to show you why here in just a little bit. So I'm just going to try to match that blue in the sky, a little bit of that purple, something like that. And now because I have a mask applied here on this color balance, I can just go over here into my paintbrush and let's bring down the size, something like that. I'm going to use my pencil, and using pressure for opacity, I can paint in some black here and just retain the color in this bridge that we liked, but still keep this more blue purple area in the water matching off in the distance. So now if I toggle this on and off, you can see that that really helps it give it that glow and that balance. So now we've kind of matched these 2 images, the exposures, the colors, and it's looking a lot better. Now let's jump back into our other layers. We have a mountain here on the left, so we want to keep this mountain. So the first thing I can do is go into my select options. I'm going to use the quick select. Let's zoom in here, and I'm just going to scrub around on this rock until it selects about what I want. I don't have to get it perfect because we're going to do some masking. So I'm going to start off with that. Now I can just tap on this mask and we have a nice little rock. So now let's come over here into our transform. Let's transform this. Something about like this. Let's try that. And now when we tap done, we can go back into our mask. I'm just going to use the same brush and we're going to paint out this bottom area. and just reducing the size of my brush to something like this. Let's just try that out. And let's get rid of this part here. Just blend that right into the weeds. So something like this. And just try to make it somewhat believable here that these rocks are just embedded here into this grass. And we're going to color correct that as well, but before we do, let's add this mountain here on the right. Let's do the same thing. So quick select, just scrub over here, we've got this mountain selected. And you know what, we can select some of this on the bottom half too, because we can always mask it out if it doesn't work. So we'll try something like that. And we'll tap mask, and that's starting off to look real good. We're going to just move this over here and do something kind of like that. We're going to move this a little bit into the water. So it's going to look something like this in the water. And now we want to add some misty area here at the bottom. So I'm going to tap into this mask that we created. Let's do the same thing, just kind of paint a faded look at the bottom using our black brush. And I want to change the size just to be down a little bit. Something like this. Come over here. And as we zoom out, we can see that's starting to look really good, but just hide that bottom until it's somewhat believable that it's just here in the waters. Okay, so that's starting to look good too. So now we need to just do the same thing with each of these images. We need to change the color balance and the exposure. So first I'm going to go over here to the mountain left. Let's tap on our layers property and tap add clip adjustment. And with our color balance, let's just try to match this. Make it look a little bit more of this magenta and blue. Something kind of like this. Okay, so that's starting to look okay. And let's tap back on the layer, go into add clip adjustment, and I'll play with exposure. So just turn that down a little bit, match that exposure there. And we can change the offset and the gamma and just play around with these dials until you find something that's a little bit more fitting. And because this is non-destructive, you can always tap back into the color balance. You can add a little bit more red or magenta if you want, and a little bit more blue. Okay, so that's looking okay. Now let's play around with this mountain here on the right. So I'm going to tap on mountain on the right. Let's do the same thing with first the color balance. Come over here, add a little bit more of that purple. Tiny bit of that blue. Come over here, maybe something like that. And tapping back on there, I'm going to add an exposure clipped adjustment. And because this is all clipped, it's only affecting this layer, which is really nice. So we can come over here, offset that, give it kind of the same rocky edgeness as that one over to the right. Okay, we've got a nice start. Moving on up to the other layers. So coming over here, we have a palm tree. And first thing I'll do is position a bunch of these palm trees, and then we're going to worry about the color correction afterwards. So here with my move tool and my touch shortcut, I can tap and drag out, and I'm going to just duplicate some of these trees. And I first want one about right here. I'm going to transform this. Something like that looks okay. And then I'll tap and drag out to duplicate this again. And maybe with transform this time, I'm going to rotate it a little bit. Bring it down, something like this. And we'll move it something like that. Maybe make it a tad shorter. And then I want to tap done, and we're going to duplicate this again over on this side. But now when I tap on transform, I can flip this using this button. I'm going to flip this and just move it over here. Rotate it a little bit. Just give it a different skew here, just to make it look a little bit more unique. Do something like that. And that's actually starting to look okay. Now I'm going to grab this palm tree layer, move it over here. Let's scale this down. Scale it down something like that. We'll hide it behind this rock. First we'll just keep it right there. And we'll tap done, and we're just going to duplicate this once more. Go into transform, flip this, rotate it a little bit. Scale it down. Okay, so there are 5 palm trees. What we want to do is just swipe over here to the right and add all of these palm trees into one folder, one group, and we can just name this palm tree. And now that we've done this, we can work with all of these combined. First thing I want to do is actually add a mask. So I'm going to add this mask layer. I'm going to come over here with my brush, and I'm just going to mask out the bottom of these. And now that's looking really good. And now we can start with the exposure and the color balance here. So first thing, actually, when I tap on this palm tree, I can go into this More menu here. I can go like I've done before in the layer properties and add something. But if I tap on the More menu, I can add a clipped adjustment right here. And here I'm going to tap exposure. Let's just bring that down, make it quite a bit darker, something like that. And then we'll mess with the color balance. So More menu. And we can't add a clipped adjustment to a clipped adjustment, so we want to tap right here on the palm tree. Let's try that again, dot, 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 and add a clipped adjustment, color balance. Let's give it some of that purple look, some of the blue, some of that red, and I actually want this to be a bit darker too, so I'm going to tap back into the exposure, come over here, just make it a bit darker. And we've done all that. I'm going to actually select all of these layers, the color balance. Oops, not that color balance, but palm tree, color balance 5, and exposure 4. I'm just going to group this, and we'll call this trees. And just to keep our layers small, and we can do some of that over here too. So anything that has to do with this bridge layer, we've got the color balance, and another color balance and exposure. Let's just group that. We'll call this bridge. And now we have the mountain left, exposure 2, and color balance. We can group that into mountain left and do the same thing here, mountain right. Okay, so now we have fewer layers to worry about and deal with. It'll make it a lot easier to find what we want to. So now let's go into this lion, and just to save some time, I've already masked this out. And if you want to see what this looks like before it was masked, we can tap on this mask eyeball, so we just have this image. I just did a quick selection here and just made it a little bit faster. So now we just want to move this lion. So we want to move it over here to the front of the bridge, and let's scale this down. So something like this looks good. And then I want to create a shadow for this lion. So I can go into my move tool and duplicate this selection. Now that I have it duplicated, I can go into transform, and I'm just going to flip this down, something like that. We want to make sure the feet are touching, and I'm going to zoom in just to show you in a little bit more detail what we're doing here. And I think that'll look okay. And you can use some of this other free transform here if you want to kind of warp this out or whatever you want to do here. So I think something like that is a good starting point. And I want to blur this layer, so I can go into my effects menu here and just add a Gaussian blur here. And what is the amount? We're going to play with just barely, so something like 3 pixels maybe, or let's try 4. So something like that, just to give it a slight blur. And now we're going to add a clipped adjustment. Let's go into exposure. And we actually want to make this black because shadows don't have details like that unless it's reflection. This is not going to be reflection, so that's starting to look good. And now I want to take these 2 layers and move it down below this lion, just so those feet kind of stand out above the shadow. And then I'm going to group these 2 layers. Let's group those. Let's add a blending option. And we have a darken option, or a multiply option actually would be okay. And after we do that, let's just turn this down, something like this. And we've got a nice looking shadow. Okay, now that's looking pretty good. Now let's go back to our lion, because we have to set some color balance and exposure here. So add clipped adjustment layer, color balance. Give it that magenta. Look at that. So it just looks like it's blending right into the image there. just playing around with that, you can start to get a taste for when it's going to look good. You don't want to go too blue. Just fit that. Something like that I think looks really good. And we may not even need to play with exposure, but let's just give it a whirl here because it's non-destructive. We can go over here into exposure, see if it helps to darken it a little bit. I actually like it a little bit lighter, and let's just see if we want to offset. If we do offset, maybe we can make the hair around the edge just glow a tiny bit more. So I think I kind of like that. So just a 0.2 or 0.48. Let's do something like that. Now we can add all of these lion layers here into a group. Now we can just call this lion. And now we want to slap on some birds. So we've got the birds here. Let's just move those. Oops. Let's tap on the birds layer, just move those over here. And let's scale them down to be more fitting, something like this. And the last thing we want here is just this lens flare. So we have a lens flare, and it's a JPEG image, so we want to bleed in the lightness of this lens flare into the image. So let's go into blend mode. We can go over here. We don't want to darken any of these layers because it's going to retain those dark pixels and just blend in the lighter layers. So maybe lighten or screen. So there's lighten, there's screen, and either one of these, depending on what you like. I'm going to start off with screen here, and let's just go ahead and move this something like right here, causing that shadow. So if we were to stop right here, it would look really good. But because this is Photoshop, we can do even better. So I'm going to bring my lion layer actually up here to the very top. And then when I select on my birds layer, I want to create a new layer in between there. And I'm just going to call this layer orange cast. And let's just use our elliptical marquee tool and go into the more menu. I'm going to add a feather. Let's try it at 300 pixels. This is something that I like to try it, just see if it looks good, and then I'll try something else if it doesn't. So first of all, let's pick kind of an orange color. Something like that I think looks okay. Orange, about right there. So with my paint bucket tool, let's just tap inside of there, and that might look okay. So now let's go into the transform. I'm going to just transform this a little bit. Something like that. Let's bring it down here. Okay, and we'll tap done, and I can deselect this. And let's go into our blend modes here, and I'm just going to try an overlay. I'll tap right there. So that overlay just gives it a little bit more of that orange, and you can see the difference here. Just a little bit of that orange cast for everything. I think that really helps bring everything back together. And it's actually underneath this lion, so that casting looks okay. I think I like that. Alright, continuing on this magical journey, we're going to add just a little bit more of a glowing cast here above these mountains. So we have the orange cast, we have the lens flare, but right above the lion group layer, we're going to tap new layer, and let's click on our circular marquee tool. And first, I want to have a feather of just between 100 or 150 pixels, somewhere around there. And now I just want to tap and drag a size something like this. It doesn't have to be perfect because you can always resize it. But let's just add just a white color in there using the paint bucket fill. So something like that. And again, I didn't worry about the size, but I can go into transform now and just resize this or move it around to wherever I want. I think I like a size somewhere around right there. So that looks good. And just underneath that layer, so again, tap on the lion layer, tap new layer, and let's create another feathered selection. So we're going to add maybe 350, somewhere around there. And let's constrain this to be a nice circle. Move this right here. And let's add something orange. So maybe B88007. Or somewhere around there. It doesn't really matter, just an orange cast. And now we're going to use the paint bucket tool and just blend that in as well. So now that looks okay, but we want to play again with the blending layers. So here with the white layer, let's add a linear dodge. And then here we want to add a screen, something like that. And now we can just play around with the opacity. Just get it something like this. Add just a little bit more of that yellow. This might be a tad too bright. Something like that. And again, maybe we can select both of these, go into transform, and just move this just to be a tad smaller. Something like that. And we'll tap done. So now just to summarize what we've done here, and this is something that you can do with multiple composites. Basically, we're masking images together, we're resizing them, and then we're adding adjustment layers like the hue and saturation, the exposure, and different things just to set that similarity between the color balance and things like that in the image. And you want to start off with the main background images first, just blend that together, and then just add those additional pieces and make that look good. If you try to first composite all these pieces together and try to match one with another, it might be a little bit hairy. But if you work in a layered process where you kind of build from the foundation up, it becomes a lot easier to match an image like this. And this is all non-destructive, so all of these layers here, you have access to change any of these color balances or control as well. So this is really the beauty and power of Photoshop, and a project like this is really fun using Photoshop for the iPad. That's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to leave a comment below.